The problem with gamers these days is that they're so entitled. They just want everything for free. If you can't afford to pay the devs for their hard work to bring you this quality product, then you don't deserve to play it. At least that's the argument I'm sure we've all heard a million times by now, and it's based on something called a logical fallacy. Now, a logical fallacy is an argument that appears correct on the surface, but really isn't due to a false premise or something along those lines. There are lots of different kinds of them, and I'm going to put a link down in the description you can read about more. But I'm just going to talk about some of the really common ones that I see in gaming communities and why they're dangerous and how you can spot them, or even how you can refute them. The one I used in my opening statement is called the strawman fallacy, an argument based on misrepresentation of an opponent's position, or more commonly known as, you put words in my mouth. If you ever see a comment like that, chances are it's in reply to someone who was saying something like, I think this game is too expensive, or I think this cash shop item is too expensive, or I don't like the way they're selling RNG boxes for dyes, or something along those lines. And what they're looking for is for the price to come down so that the value is there, that they see value in their purchase, and right now they don't. But the person replying is assuming that they're asking for everything for free because either they can't or won't pay for it at all, and because they're too entitled to do that. This is a convenient way for someone to write off your entire argument and just call you entitled, and it's dangerous because it appeals to emotion. And they don't really actually go back and look and realize that no, he's not asking for things to be free, he's asking for a more fair price point. And there are options between 0 and whatever it is it's currently priced at. It doesn't have to be $0. But in using the strawman, if it isn't called out, you can make your opponent look like they're calling for something ridiculous and sway favor towards your side of the argument against them. And the other one that you see paired up with this quite often is called ad hominem, which is evasion of the actual topic by directly attacking your opponent. They'll get to dismiss your entire argument without ever actually having to even talk about it. This one comes up all the time with PvP. Say someone comes along and says, I have a problem with the PvP system where two opponents face off against each other, and the one with the higher tier of gear always wins, no matter which one is more skilled. Chances are the first reply is, stop being such a Care Bear. And it'll be massively upvoted, and it'll be popular, and everyone will join in. And they don't realize that they're not actually attacking his argument, which might be perfectly valid. Gear scaling might be screwy, and it needs some adjusting. Especially in a game that toots itself as a skill-based game. But by calling someone a Care Bear, you get to single them out and everyone else gets to join in, excluding the guy. It basically cuts the ground out from under him so he has nothing to stand on and nobody listens to his argument, even though it's perfectly valid. Now, there's two more that are pretty bad that often go hand in hand as well. The first one is the relative privation, or the not as bad as argument. You'll see this come up all the time when somebody puts out a new cash shop and you see items that are priced at $30 and someone goes, that's too much money, that's too expensive for a cash shop item. And that's met with, yeah, well, it's not as bad as this other game that also had stats on their items or on their costumes. Well, that might be true, but it doesn't mean that the complaints about this game are invalid. It doesn't mean that $30 is a good price just because someone else sold it for $30 with stat boosts. You have to remember that there will always be someone who has it worse and someone who has it better. It's like saying that we're not allowed to complain about any problems in our own lives because somewhere else in the world somebody is starving. It's exactly the same argument. The one that goes along with this, I couldn't find an actual name for, but it's the it doesn't affect me argument. And someone will say, oh, well, that doesn't affect me, therefore it's not a problem for anyone. And I would like to read a little comment that I have in my Reddit inbox on exactly this topic. Now, this comment is in regards to Black Desert Online selling something called the ghillie suit, and it's a little camouflage sniper suit that comes with some stat boosts, and it hides the nameplate over your character's head. So you can sneak up on people a whole lot easier and get the drop on them before they even realize what's going on. Now, sure, your character glows if somebody else looks directly at you, but chances are you're going to come up behind them, they're not paying a whole lot of attention. It does give you an advantage. There's really no way around that. But here's what someone had to say. I have an argument against the ghillie being pay to win. I kill ghillie fags all the time. They sure used $30, but it didn't let them win. So basically what he's saying is that because he's able to kill these people who are wearing the ghillie suit, that it's not a problem. That even though they have an advantage that they paid for, that nobody else can have unless they pay for as well, it's not an issue because he was able to kill one. It's this kind of thing that lets publishers kind of do what they want because, oh, somebody said, well, it doesn't bother me, therefore go ahead and do whatever. The problem is, sooner or later, something's going to come along that does affect you, and then maybe everyone else will say, well, it doesn't bother me, so therefore it's not a problem for you. It doesn't do anything to help the community as a whole. It's a very much got mine, fuck you attitude. One that goes nicely with the not as bad as argument is the not as good as argument, or the Nirvana fallacy. This one you'll see all the time when people compare MMOs to World of Warcraft, or other Blizzard games to World of Warcraft. I saw someone the other day say that all Blizzard games since World of Warcraft are shit because they're not as popular. Well, you're comparing it to an impossible standard. World of Warcraft was the #1 most popular game in the world for something like 8 or 10 years. How do you compare to that? Just because Overwatch or StarCraft or whatever isn't as popular as World of Warcraft doesn't mean the game is shit. It just means you're comparing it to something unrealistic. And this will happen all the time with individual mechanics in MMOs where they'll say, well, Warcraft did it better, therefore this one sucks or is invalid. Well, no, it probably still is a good system with its own merits and drawbacks, but just because somebody else has done it better doesn't mean it's totally invalid. But if you really want to see the danger of logical fallacies, pop into like a subreddit for one of the games after something controversial has happened. On the first few days, you're going to get all the posts from people saying this is bullshit, this is terrible, you guys got to stop this, like, here's all the things you guys are doing wrong, and so on. But after a couple of days, and the dust settles, there's always a post in defense of what's going on, saying that everyone else is unreasonable. And this post, I guarantee you, will be a novel in length. It'll be loaded with every single one of these logical fallacies that I've mentioned, and then a few extras, multiple times, and it will be highly upvoted with a whole bunch of people agreeing. And it's not until someone takes the time to dissect the entire post piece by piece and post a huge, like a double the length novel explaining why these are, where these logical fallacies are, which ones they are, what they mean, and why they're false or not incorrect, that things start to shift. And by then, the post has been up for so long and has had so much attention, and people haven't even bothered to read the comments, that it changes the attitude of the community. It gives the publishers or the company behind the game a license to do as they please, or to continue whatever it is they've just done, this controversial thing, because they have some backing from the community who put up an argument full of these logical fallacies, and everyone else went, yeah, that sounds like it makes sense, I'm not going to look into it anymore. You know, it doesn't bother me, so okay, it's not a problem. That kind of thing. These posts will typically start out by saying, the problem with gamers today is that they're too entitled, they want everything for free. Sound familiar? And then they'll go on to calling us Care Bears, or jobless, or whatever else, or too poor to afford it, or something along those lines to depose our position. And then they'll appeal to authority, another one, where they talk about how awesome the developers are and what they've promised and what they've said, without really considering how their actions might conflict with that. You know, a perfect example is if you go through the Star Citizen subreddit, people take anything Chris Roberts says at face value, even though it may be completely contrary to his own actions. They do this simply because he's an industry figure with a long history, and people love him, and so they take what he says at face value without considering anything else. But these posts will typically go through all the different groups of people who have an issue, or all the different concerns that were raised about whatever controversial thing was done, and attack them. Just take ad hominem and attack these groups and make these people sound like they have no ground to stand on, without actually having to attack the merits of their argument. They'll cherry pick certain little pieces and attack those while ignoring things that might be perfectly valid. This often happens to examples or comparisons that aren't quite perfect. They'll cherry pick this one example and say, because it's not perfect, your whole argument is invalid. I mean, all it really means is you need to find a better example, or there's something that isn't quite right, but it generally doesn't matter. The idea is there. And then, of course, there's a part where they mention how it's not as bad as some other game they played that failed, and how this one is so much better, even though it's still bad. It's still a problem. If you pay attention and you watch gaming communities, I guarantee you this will happen every single time. Every time there is a controversial decision or game launch, there will be one of these posts a few days after. And this is the kind of thing that creates a divide in the community, and so the publisher doesn't really have to take any action at all because their community is divided. It's not like a unanimous call for lower the prices or take back this change you made or whatever, because there's still a whole bunch of support for it from people who say, oh, it doesn't bother me any, or oh, they have to make money somehow, Well, yeah, they have to make money somehow, but it doesn't have to be selling pay-to-win items or whatever they're doing. There are other options. But as long as the community remains divided, then the publisher is free to just not make any changes, because enough people still support them that they can get away with it. Now, if both sides had legitimate ground to stand on, this would be great, but when one side, especially the supporting side, is basing their entire argument on ad hominem and other logical fallacies, it's pretty frustrating to see. So in conclusion, when you say that gamers are entitled, well, yes we are. We are entitled to our opinions, we are entitled to spend our money how we please, we are entitled to not spend our money how we please. We're not entitled to things for free. Obviously, that's incorrect. Developers and publishers are entitled to set whatever prices they want and to sell whatever it is they want at any price point with any conditions. But gamers are also entitled to say, no, I don't see value in that. I don't believe that's worth my money, and I'm not going to spend my money until something changes. This sort of criticism is healthy. Either the publisher changes, and they reduce their prices, they change their stats, whatever, to satisfy the consumer, or the consumer walks away and finds another product that does suit what they're looking for. Both of these are perfectly valid. What's harmful is when someone comes along and says, you're just entitled and want everything for free, or you're a Care Bear, or it doesn't bother me, so your criticism is invalid. All this does is suppress what could be a legitimate criticism or a legitimate comment, but here you are suppressing the discussion under a false premise. As a consumer, it's in your best interest to fight for a fair price for reasonable value. If you think that what they're offering is reasonable, then say so, and make your argument for it, rather than simply attacking the people who think otherwise. That's all I have to say. I'm out.